On my 65th birthday, I wrote in the family group chat, "Dad misses you kids." No one replied. Later, my son texted, "We are on vacation. Dad, do not be so dramatic. Happy birthday. I will send you the hotel bill in a bit." That very night, I did something they never expected. I shut down the ATM machine called Vincent Henderson. Welcome to Dad's real-life revenge. My name is Vincent. If you have ever been treated like a financial tool by the very people you love, you will understand how I feel right now. I am glad you are here. Stay with me until the end to see how I took back my self-respect. And leave a comment telling me the city you are watching from, so I can see how far my story has traveled. 7:30 in the morning. The silence was so deep that I could almost hear the blood rushing through my veins. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded dry and hollow, like the tapping of a life sentence being handed down for loneliness. I sat at the familiar oak table, where just 2 years ago, Martha used to sit across from me complaining that I put too much sugar in my coffee. Now the seat across from me was nothing but empty space and sunlight drifting through dancing specks of dust. I picked up my phone. The bright screen reflected my wrinkled face and my tired eyes. My fingers trembled as I opened the family group chat with all 12 members in it. I typed and retyped every word as if it were a final prayer sent to the people who carried my blood. All I wanted was a small sign of presence, a hug, or simply a warm dinner filled with the laughter of my grandchildren. 1 hour passed. Then 2. My phone lay motionless on the cold table. I stared at it, waiting for the smallest signal. I lied to myself, thinking maybe Leonard was busy in a board meeting, maybe Sarah was rushing the kids to school. But my heart knew the truth. This was indifference carefully programmed. Close to 2 in the afternoon, a notification finally appeared. Leonard did not wish me a happy birthday. He did not ask how I was doing. He simply threw a command at me, wrapped in sarcasm, about an old man being dramatic. To him, my feelings were a burden, but my wallet was a privilege he believed he deserved. My chest tightened as a sharp pain spread from my heart to the top of my head. I had never talked about the nights I worked double shifts at the factory, my feet swollen and bleeding just to buy them their designer clothes or their first cars. I had never asked for repayment. But the way they used my money to enjoy luxury in the Bahamas while leaving me to fade away in silence on my birthday was an insult I could not forgive. That very night I cut off their access to the accounts they had been using. 37 missed calls later, a storm was already on the horizon. I stood up and walked toward my desk. The trembling was gone, replaced by a cold determination. I looked at Martha's photograph and whispered, "The game is over." After I pressed the confirmation button to block every secondary card, I set the phone down on the table. I stood there in the dim darkness of the living room, feeling a chilling silence before the real storm arrived. For a moment I wondered if I had been too cruel. But then Leonard's message flashed through my mind again like a blade cutting through the last piece of compassion I had left. Less than 10 minutes later, the phone began vibrating violently against the wooden table, producing sharp, relentless sounds. The screen kept lighting up with Leonard's name, then Sarah's, and then Mike's. They were calling as if their house were on fire, as if their lives were hanging by a thread. I did not pick up. I stood still, watching that small device scream for the privileges they had just mocked me for giving them a few hours earlier. 37 missed calls, and dozens of angry voice messages flooded my voicemail. I began opening them one by one. Leonard's voice exploded through the speaker, full of arrogance and humiliation. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? My card just got declined in front of my boss and my clients at the restaurant. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" They looked at me like I was some kind of fraud. "Turn it back on right now, or you will regret it." I could hear him breathing heavily, the rage of someone who had always treated another person's wallet as his own. Next came Sarah. Her voice was breaking through tears and the loud background noise of an upscale shopping mall. "Dad, I am standing at the checkout with a cart full of things for the kids. Everyone is staring at me because the card will not work. Are you trying to kill me with embarrassment? I do not even have any cash with me." I smiled bitterly. She had no cash yet. She always had money to buy designer dresses worth thousands of dollars with the sweat of my labor. The anger inside me slowly gave way to something colder, something painfully clear. I realized that in their eyes, I was not a father. I was an ATM machine with emotions. A tool they used to maintain their glamorous and artificial image in front of the world. When the card worked, I was the wonderful father. When the money stopped flowing, I became selfish and irrational. I walked to the window and looked out onto the quiet street. Betrayal does not come from enemies. It comes from the people you would once have given your life to protect. Leonard was humiliated in front of his boss. Sarah was crying because she could not pay at the store. Mike was probably terrified someone would repossess his shiny car. Every one of their worries revolved around money. Not one of them asked why I had done this. Not one of them wondered whether my heart had been shattered that morning. They never called to ask for advice or to talk. They called when they needed money. And every time before this I had always said yes. But that indulgence was over. I felt a strange new strength moving through my veins. This was not blind revenge. It was surgery cutting away the tumors of dependency. I looked again at the transaction history and saw the luxury expenses in the Bahamas. I had worked double shifts at the factory until retirement so they could live that life. And they used that very money to buy their contempt for me. I am glad you are here. Stay with me until the end of this story, because this is where the real awakening begins. This fight is only the beginning of a journey to reclaim my freedom. I walked into the bedroom and took out Martha's old notebook. It was time to look at the real numbers behind this deception. I walked into my minimalist bedroom where the faint scent of lavender from Martha's pillows still lingered like a quiet comfort. I opened the drawer of the oak dresser and took out an old tin box that held the secrets I had tried to ignore for far too long. Inside were stacks of bills, bank statements, and the leather notebook Martha used to track our expenses before she left this world. I turned each page slowly, feeling as if I were touching wounds that had never fully healed. The numbers began to reveal themselves with brutal clarity, and every number carried a sweet lie behind it. $28,700 of my retirement savings had vanished over the past 12 months. Every dollar had gone to the so-called emergencies my children had carefully invented. I remembered the panic on Mike's face when he claimed he needed money for an urgent surgery after an accident. In reality, it had been used to cover debts from his reckless partying. I remembered the tears in Sarah's eyes when she told me Emma could not afford her school tuition. The truth was that she used the money to buy the newest collection of designer handbags. Martha had been right. She had warned me again and again that I was enabling them instead of truly helping them. She had called it toxic kindness. Under the soft glow of the desk lamp, I found her wedding ring resting at the bottom of the box. An old promise rose in my mind. Martha had made me promise that if she were ever gone, I would live for myself. Yet for the past 2 years, I had been a servant to the greed of children who were already grown. I had denied myself comfort just to play the role of an endless wallet, while they treated my existence with quiet contempt. The change inside me felt like an earthquake. I began sorting through Martha's old closet. As I held one of her worn sweaters, a strange strength rose within me. I was no longer the pitiful old father abandoned on his birthday. I was a man reclaiming his life from parasites. This time the name Vincent Henderson would no longer be associated with weakness. I would live for Martha, and I would live for myself. I tightened my grip around her wedding ring, feeling the cold metal press into my palm like a solemn oath. Tomorrow morning Leonard would come here, and I was ready to show him that the ATM machine he relied on was not just closed. It had disappeared forever. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a different man from the one who had woken up that morning. A man ready to face the storm. The roar of a car engine from the end of the street crashed straight into the living room, rattling the old photographs on the shelf. I sat there at the oak table, my hand gripping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The front door burst open with a violent bang. Leonard stormed in, his face flushed red and his breath heavy with anger. His expensive shoes slammed against the floor, each sharp step shattering the quiet I had tried to preserve all morning. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Dad?" Leonard shouted, waving his leather wallet as if he wanted to throw it straight at my face. "Do you have any idea how humiliated I was? My boss, my clients, everyone was standing there watching me like I was some kind of clown when that stupid card got declined. Are you trying to destroy my career over a birthday message? Are you really that selfish?" I did not stand up. I did not even look at him. Slowly, I set my coffee cup down and felt the faint trembling of the floor beneath my feet. Selfish. I repeated the word silently in my mind and felt a bitter, almost laughable sting. 15 years of working double shifts at the machine shop, hands covered in scars, my back bent from carrying the weight of his tuition, and all it had earned me was the word selfish. "When was the last time you called just to ask how your father was doing?" My voice was calm, so calm that even I was surprised. Leonard froze. He clearly did not expect a question. He had expected an apology like always. For a moment he seemed thrown off balance, but his arrogance quickly filled the silence. "Here we go again," he snapped. "You are starting that dramatic speech again just to guilt-trip us. I am busy. I have a future to worry about. I have to make money. Are you making money? Or spending mine on luxury vacations in the Bahamas?" I finally lifted my head and looked straight into his cold eyes. Silence swallowed the room. The only sound was Leonard's heavy breathing. I stood up slowly, walked to the cabinet, and took out a jar of the pasta sauce I had cooked the night before. The rich smell of tomatoes and thyme spread through the air, bringing back memories of family dinners when Martha was still alive. Leonard glanced at the jar. For the briefest moment, a flicker of something passed through his eyes. Regret, perhaps, but it disappeared just as quickly. "You stand here demanding money and privileges." I continued, my voice tightening. "But have you ever once seen the loneliness of the old man who lives in this house?" Leonard took a step back. His mouth moved, but the words did not come out clearly. For the first time he truly looked around the empty house. He saw the dust gathering on his mother's chair. The emotion in my chest tightened like a knot. I pushed the jar of sauce toward him. "You say you want money, but you would not even know how to survive without my card. Take this jar and go, Leonard. This is the only thing left from the love you can still receive from this house." Leonard stared at the jar, then back at me. He seemed trapped between anger and a new unfamiliar feeling of shame. But this confrontation was only the beginning. Leonard did not yet know that I had not only locked the cards, I had also prepared another surprise hidden inside the will Martha left behind. And the drama would rise even higher when the secret about Sarah's fake investment money finally came to light. Stay with me, because real justice was about to begin. Leonard left with a slam of the door so hard that the wedding photo of Martha and me rattled on the shelf. The silence returned, but it carried no peace. It was heavy like lead pressing down on the room. I sat in the old armchair, feeling the wood creak beneath the weight of an aging body worn down by years of lies. I opened my leather notebook and began underlining the numbers I had ignored for far too long. $28,700. For millionaires it might not be much. But for a retired factory worker like me, it was sweat, blood, and sleepless nights on the factory floor, meant to buy a little security in old age. Yet in just 1 year, that money had been torn apart by the very children I would once have given my life to protect. Every expense replayed in my mind, like scenes from a horror film. I remembered the day Sarah came to my house with swollen eyes, crying that Emma needed a large amount of money for psychological treatment after the trauma of losing her grandmother. I did not hesitate. I withdrew $5,000 and handed it to her without the slightest suspicion. Now, looking at my bank statement, I could see the transaction clearly. That money had been used at a cryptocurrency exchange the very same night. My daughter had used her child's grief and her mother's death as bait for her own greed. The truth was so raw, it made me feel sick. I realized I had not been helping my children through hardship. I had been feeding monsters wearing the faces of family. My generosity had been the poison that slowly stripped away their humanity. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. From the refrigerator I took out the remaining jar of tomato sauce. The strong scent of garlic and thyme filled the air, bringing back memories of when Martha was still alive. "Vincent," she used to say, "do not become an endless wallet for them. They will forget how to stand on their own feet." At the time, I had scolded her for being too harsh with the children. Now every one of her words felt like a slap against my own foolishness. I looked at myself in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked unfamiliar, his eyes marked by the deep lines of disappointment. I decided to clean out Martha's closet. One by one I folded her sweaters and scarves neatly. When I picked up her wedding ring, a sharp jolt ran down my spine. That was the moment I made a promise to myself. From this point forward I would never allow anyone to trample on my kindness again. Locking the cards was only the beginning. I would make them see the rot inside themselves. I would tear away Sarah's mask right in front of Leonard, so they could witness how quickly their so-called family loyalty would collapse once the flow of money stopped. I knew the next storm was already on its way. Sarah had just sent a message saying she was standing outside my house holding a stack of unpaid bills. But this time, Vincent Henderson would not open the door with his wallet. He would open it with the most bitter truth they had ever faced. The doorbell rang again and again, sharp and impatient, as if it wanted to shatter the fragile silence still clinging to the house. I did not rush. I slowly tightened the laces of my shoes and looked at myself in the mirror one last time before facing the next wave of anger. When I opened the door, Sarah was standing there with a pale face and messy hair, nothing like the polished image she showed on social media. Leonard had returned as well. He leaned against his shiny car, his eyes narrowed with resentment. "Dad, please," Sarah blurted out, her voice shaking with fear. "I owe people money. Do you know what loan sharks will do if I do not pay that crypto debt today? Are you really going to watch your own daughter get thrown out onto the street?" She began to cry. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but now all I saw was the performance of a bad actress trying to play her final scene to squeeze money from an old man. I stepped out onto the porch. The cold air of the late afternoon brushed against my old coat. I looked straight at Sarah, then at Leonard. These were the two children Martha and I had once treasured like jewels, money or love. The answer was clear in the way they stood there. Not a single word asking how I was after the shock of the morning. Only numbers. Only threats. "When was the last time either of you called just to ask how your father was doing?" I asked the question again, my voice lower, now sharper. Sarah froze. Her crying stopped instantly. Leonard stepped forward until his face was inches from mine. "Stop the moral act, Dad. You have money. You have plenty of retirement savings and this house. What are you saving it for, while your own children are drowning in debt? Are you planning to take it all to the grave to keep Mom company?" The words hit harder than any slap. My chest tightened as if a hand had wrapped around my heart. Without saying a word, I turned back into the house, grabbed the jar of pasta sauce Martha had once taught me to make, and hurled it onto the brick ground right in front of Leonard. The glass shattered. Red sauce splattered across his expensive shoes, spreading like dark stains of dried blood. "You do not love me," I said quietly. "You love my wallet. You love the blind protection I foolishly gave you for years." Martha was right. I raised monsters instead of human beings. Leonard looked down at his stained shoes. His face twisted with anger, but there was also something else now. Fear. Fear of the sudden transformation of the father who had always been quiet and obedient. "From this moment on, every number you counted on has turned into nothing." I turned to Sarah, the daughter who had once been my greatest pride. "Your brother-in-law owes money in crypto, and you used your child's illness as an excuse to steal from my retirement. Tell me something, Sarah. Are you still human?" Sarah lowered her head. She could not meet my eyes. Her shoulders trembled, whether from shame or from the loss of money she thought she would get. I no longer cared. I turned around, stepped back inside, and locked the door behind me, leaving my two children standing in the yard among the broken glass and the strong smell of tomato sauce. The knot inside my chest finally loosened. I did not feel pain anymore. I felt free. But I knew the real reversal had not happened yet. Leonard and Sarah would not give up so easily, and the biggest surprise was still waiting in the hands of a third person they would never expect. Stay with me, because the real key to justice in this story had not yet been revealed. I sat motionless behind the locked wooden door, listening, as Leonard's angry curses echoed across the yard and Sarah's dramatic sobbing slowly faded away. The house returned to its terrifying silence, but inside my mind the pieces of betrayal were finally falling into place. I walked to my desk and pulled out the stack of documents I had quietly collected, with the help of an old friend who worked at the bank. This was the moment Sarah's mask would finally fall. I picked up my phone. My hands were no longer trembling. I opened the voice recording I had captured from their argument last month when they thought I had fallen asleep in the armchair. Sarah's voice filled the dark room cold enough to send a chill down my spine. "Dad is old. Sooner or later this house will belong to us. Just say Emma needs money for treatment and he will hand everything over." That sentence had been the fatal blade that cut through my last thread of trust. It turned out that her husband's crypto debt was only the visible tip of the iceberg. Sarah had been using my retirement money to cover up her shady investments and the luxurious image she paraded across social media. She had not only deceived me, she had deceived her own brother as well, trying to secure a larger share of the inheritance she believed I would eventually leave behind. The truth was so raw it made my stomach turn. I felt disgusted at the very blood running through their veins. But the moment the flow of money stopped, their true nature appeared clearly. I stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, Sarah was frantically searching through the mailbox as if she were hunting for a final glimmer of hope. What she did not know was that I had already transferred full ownership of this house into a trust they would never be able to touch. A strange sense of release washed over me. The pain had crossed the threshold into numbness. I no longer felt sorry for myself. I felt sorry for them. Children raised with the sacrifices of their parents, yet grown into adults with the hearts of emotional creditors. I turned on my computer and sent a single email to my family lawyer. The message was short and clear. Activate the inheritance modification clause immediately. The moment Sarah used my granddaughter Emma as a lie, she severed the final bond between us. The truth about the crypto debts and the lies was about to step into the light. And this time, no jar of pasta sauce could soften the anger of justice. I poured myself a glass of water and felt the cool liquid slide down my throat. The financial storm they had created would soon swallow them whole, and I would stand safely on the shore watching the collapse of an empire built entirely on lies. Do not look away, because a new character is about to enter this story, and that person will completely turn the game upside down. Just when the air inside the house felt frozen by hatred, another knock came at the door. This one was hesitant and gentle. It was nothing like Leonard's pounding or Sarah's shouting. When I opened the door, I saw Jake, my 17-year-old grandson, standing there. His eyes were red and swollen, and he held a crumpled stack of papers in his hands. He looked at me with such deep guilt that it almost seemed as if he believed he was the one responsible for everything that had happened. "Grandpa." "I am sorry," Jake said, his voice trembling. "I heard everything Mom said to you about Emma. I cannot stay silent anymore." He handed me the papers. They were not tastable bills for Emma like Sarah had always claimed. They were overdue debt notices and foreclosure warnings addressed to Sarah's home. "Your daughter used your money to pay off my stepfather's crypto losses," Jake continued quietly. "But it still was not enough. They lied to you so they could use the last of your retirement money to hide their mistakes." I stood there in stunned silence, staring at my grandson. For the first time that day, something warm moved through the heart that had been turning to stone inside my chest. In a family filled with predators, there was still one young soul with integrity. Jake had not come to ask for money. He had come to return the truth. He told me that Emma, my little granddaughter, was actually healthy, but she had often been forced by her mother to pretend she was sick whenever they visited me just so Sarah could ask for more money. Sarah's cruelty had reached a new depth when she began using her own child's innocence as a weapon for deception. But Jake's presence changed everything. In that moment, I realized I still had a reason to fight. Not to punish my ungrateful children, but to protect my grandchildren from the moral decay of their parents. I pulled Jake into a tight embrace, feeling the warmth of honesty that still existed in this broken family. I led him inside, poured him a glass of orange juice, and asked him to tell me everything. With each sentence he spoke, another missing piece of the betrayal fell into place. And I finally understood what I had to do. I would not simply cut off the money. I would establish a separate education trust for Jake and Emma, a fund that Sarah and Leonard would never be able to touch, not even a single dollar. Because salvation does not come from piles of cash. It comes from placing trust in the right people. Outside, the storm was still raging. But inside this room, a new flame of hope had finally been lit. Just after Jake left, my phone vibrated again. I was ready to reject the call immediately, assuming it was another attack from Leonard or Sarah. But the name on the screen made me pause. It was Mike, my youngest son, the one I had not heard from for 6 months since he disappeared with a mountain of debt. "Dad!" Mike's voice came through the phone, hoarse and trembling. In the background, I could hear wind and hurried footsteps. "I am standing in front of a rehabilitation center. I spent the last money you gave me on those terrible things. I almost ended everything because I felt like I did not deserve to live." He paused, struggling to breathe. "But today, when I was about to call you to ask for one last payment, something stopped me. I suddenly remembered the smell of Mom's pasta sauce. I remembered how you worked yourself to exhaustion at the factory just so I could have that car." I said nothing. Tears slowly slid down the deep lines on my face. Unlike Leonard's rage or Sarah's manipulation, Mike's voice carried real brokenness. "I heard you lock their cards," he continued quietly. "I am glad you did. Please do not give me another dollar, Dad. I already checked myself into this place. I will work in the carpentry shop here to pay back what I owe." His voice faltered. "I just wanted to say, I am sorry for being such a terrible son. Mike's confession felt like cool water poured onto a heart that had been burning all day. It dawned on me that my firmness had not only been punishment, it had also been the push a lost soul needed to find his way back. Mike did not call to ask for money. He called to reclaim his dignity. For the first time since the storm of financial betrayal began, I felt something that resembled redemption. Mike had broken the pattern. He called not to beg, but to confess, not to demand help, but to reject blind protection. A quiet strength rose inside me. If Mike could choose the hard road toward independence, then I had to be strong enough to support him in the right way, not as a walking wallet, but as a father. I ended the call and looked out toward the garden, where Martha's young sunflower sprouts were swaying gently in the wind. I knew then that I would not be alone. I would visit Mike. I would bring him a jar of pasta sauce, not to spoil him, but to remind him where real love comes from. The storm of hatred was slowly giving way to awakening, and I realized something important. Sometimes the best way to love someone is to let them walk forward on their own wounded feet. The sweetest revenge is not watching others suffer. It is watching the people you love become better. And the final chapter of my life was opening with a completely different color. This morning I woke up in a small hotel room in Ireland, where the waves of the Atlantic Ocean crashed gently against the magnificent cliffs of Moher. There are no more phone calls demanding money, no more piles of unpaid bills from my children thrown in my face every morning. I hold a postcard with a sunflower on it, the flower Martha loved most, and I smile at my reflection in the mirror. At 64 years old, I finally understand what the breath of freedom feels like after having the courage to walk through the storm of betrayal. Leonard and Sarah are no longer part of my life through threats or desperate pleas. When I announced my new will transferring all my assets into an education trust for Jake and Emma, they screamed like starving animals. But I simply looked at them calmly and said one sentence. I gave you my entire life. Now I will give you something more valuable than money: self-respect. When the flow of money stopped, they were forced to face a harsh reality and begin learning how to work honestly to repay the debts created by their own mistakes. Now my silence is the strongest answer I can give. I chose to love with boundaries instead of blind protection. The latest message from Mike arrived this morning. It was a photo of him building an oak chair with his own hands at the rehabilitation center workshop. He did not ask for money. He only wrote, "I am trying so that one day you can sit on this chair and feel proud of me." Tears fell onto the postcard in my hands, but they were tears of relief and hope. If you have followed this story all the way to this moment, please help us with one small and quick thing. Subscribe. Many people watch without doing it, and it costs you nothing but means a great deal to us. I stand on the windy cliff, feeling how small a person truly is before the vast power of nature. The pain of the past now feels like nothing more than grains of sand beneath my feet. I have reclaimed my life. I have reclaimed the dignity of a father, and most importantly, I have regained my faith in the integrity of the next generation through Jake and Emma. Life is a series of choices, and I am proud that in the end I chose the right one. Welcome to my new life, a life with no bills, only dreams that are just beginning to bloom.